2 years ago, I moved to uptown Dallas, to a 3-story brownstone. It was really close to the freeway in downtown, but the entrance to my garage and my place were both gated, so I felt quite safe. The first level was a small study, the garage, and an entryway hall. The second floor was the dining area, kitchen and living room, and the upstairs was master bedroom and bathroom. I'm a single woman, and it was just me and my 2 little dogs. The night after I moved in, I was on my computer late at night, and someone started ringing my doorbell. Not just one ring, but repeated rings. I didn't know a soul in the city yet, so I didn't answer the door. It stopped, and I didn't think anything of it. The houses all looked alike, so someone probably had the wrong place. About 10 minutes later, same thing, followed by pounding on the door. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching to make sure whoever was there left and wasn't sure what to do. The bell and pounding stopped, so I assumed they left, but my 2 dogs were still standing at the door, looking up at the handle and wagging their tails. They knew someone was still there. The door was deadlocked, thank God, because what happened next still gives me chills. I saw the door handle turn, slowly. I dialed 911, and within a few minutes cops showed up. Whoever was at the door was gone by then, but my welcome mat was all wet. No idea what the liquid was. The police did not seem concerned and said someone was probably drunk and just at the wrong house. They left. I locked up and went to bed. I forgot about the incident more or less until a couple months later. There was a park across the street, so I took my dogs there a few times a day. One afternoon, I took my dogs on a long walk, locking my door behind me. When I got back 30 or 45 minutes later, something seemed off. There was a strong smell of men's cologne in my entryway. I thought it was weird, but assumed it was my neighbor's cologne wafting through the walls. A single guy lived next door to me, and a guy and a girl on the other side. I went upstairs and was cleaning up when I noticed something really weird. There was a dollar bill folded lengthwise, laying on top of my open purse. I never carry cash, and on the rare occasion I do, I certainly don't fold them lengthwise. I didn't know what to think. It made so little sense, I just assumed I must have somehow had a dollar and ended up putting it like that. A few weeks later, I woke up in the early afternoon on a Saturday after a late night out. I went downstairs to make some tea, and when I was getting my sugar substitute, I found another dollar bill folded lengthwise, just sitting in the cabinet. At this point, I got chills. I could maybe justify the first one, but not the second. I had been in and out of the cabinet the day before, and the dollar had not been there. I called the management office and asked if maintenance had been there. They said no one had been to my place since I moved in, and had asked them to hook up my washer. I told them I thought someone had been in my house. They changed my locks, which made me feel better, temporarily. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, and with a big old can of bear spray by my bed. I truly did not know what to think. Nothing had been taken from my house, ever. I tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal. I had new locks, I was overreacting. But I never felt safe in my place again. I didn't have any more dollar bill incidents until my lease ended after 15 months, and I was packing up. I started finding random dollars behind a photo of my family on the wall. A dollar bill folded lengthwise was taped. In my bathroom, another one under the sink, and another random one on the floor that must have fallen out of something the movers moved. With every dollar I found, I felt so sick. I'm not sure if it was related to that first night when someone tried to get in, but someone was in there, with my dogs, who are everything to me, in my house, pawing through my things to hide these random dollars. The people I've told don't believe me or make jokes about it, Maybe they borrowed 4 quarters. So I don't readily tell anyone. But I know someone had been in there more than once. Why and how, and what the dollars were for, I will never know. This story takes place when I was 14, 8 years ago. We lived in the suburbs, but there was this small area that teens used to walk to, probably a mile away, where there was a little patch of woods. It wasn't technically the woods, since at its deepest point you could still see the road on one side and a row of suburb houses on the other. But nevertheless, it became a place where kids would go smoke or drink before someone in one of the houses started calling the cops on everyone. One summer day, my friend Sarah, which is not her real name, and I walked there to smoke and hang out since we didn't have jobs yet. We noticed some kids must have attempted to build a tiny treehouse at the spot since our last visit. Attempted is a key word here, since it was more like just one big sad plank of horizontal lumber like 10 feet off the ground. We climbed up and saw there was a gross-looking, gnarly, dark gray blanket that looked like it had been covered in tons of wet mud and then left there to dry for some reason. Sarah told me to throw it down, but it was too disgusting to touch with my hands. So naturally, I kicked it towards her leg to freak her out. I can be an asshole. Anyway, the creepy part was that sticking out from the side of the blanket was a binder, like those cheap 3-ring binders students get at the store for a few dollars. I immediately thought there may be cash or something interesting in there, so I opened it up. Inside was full of newspaper clippings that looked like they themselves had been rubbed against some dirt, but most likely were just weathered from being outside. Sarah and I quickly realized that of the 30 or 40 articles, at least half of them seemed to be about child kidnappings, like famous cases that had been in front-page stories. Like those nationally known ones, like Elizabeth Smart or J.C. Dugard, or that guy who kept those teen girls locked in his basement for over a decade. There were no personal photographs, only newspaper clippings that were hastily cut, and it wasn't just for one particular case, but a handful of them, including a girl I'd never ever heard of. Needless to say, we both freaked out a little. We put the blanket back on top of the binder and got the hell out of there. When we went back there a month later, the treehouse had been ripped down. The binder was gone. Oh, I forgot to mention that the binder itself looked pretty clean, like it was purchased recently. But the articles in the blanket had definitely been exposed to the elements and been around for a while. Needless to say, to whoever took the time to cut out those specific stories, pictures from the newspaper, I don't want to meet you. I'll try to keep it short. This happened when I was 8. I was too young to comprehend it fully and too naive to put the puzzle pieces together. But the older I became, the more it scared me. I really have the most amazing parents in the world. There aren't enough words to describe how much I appreciate them and how perfect I think they are. My whole life I've trusted them and their friends, but just this one time things got so weird. An old colleague of my father needed a place to stay because he had lost his job, so my parents offered him my room for a month until he had sorted his stuff out. During this time, I slept with my younger brother in his room. Anyways, the guy seemed okay at first. I wanted a princess pencil case very bad, and it was quite cheap, so he bought it for me, and I was a happy little kid. Little did I know what his intentions were. As days went by, he'd come and sit on the couch with me, quite often when I watched cartoons, and every day he'd sit a little closer. I was very uncomfortable, to say the least. but confused as well and not sure what I was meant to do or say. As more time passed, I sometimes caught him staring at me and my brother while we played in our room after dinner. Again, very uneasy and uncomfortable. Eventually, I also found him snooping around my closet when I once got home from school. I was too afraid to go inside, so I sat in the kitchen with my mother. At this point, I really should have confided how uncomfortable I was with this man. But mind you, I was only 8. At this point, I was also very afraid, so I spent the rest of my days sleeping in my parents' room with my brother. He too was afraid, and the guy would sometimes just walk in to check on us. Or in the evenings, he would sometimes stand at the door and not say anything. One morning, I was watching cartoons again. He got way too close for comfort, began doing incredibly inappropriate things, and that's when I realized, hey, this isn't okay. I won't go into detail, it's rather gross and disturbing. But let's never meet again. Jesus Christ, what a creep. Edit. My parents had no idea this was going on. He obviously did it sneakily. I told my parents only once he left.
Coming back home from my deployment, I stayed at my parents' house for a few weeks while my late grandmother, who was suffering from severe dementia, stayed in the room adjacent from mine. It was around 2 a.m. when I am awoken by a blood-curdling shriek that lasted for what felt like an eternity, but must have actually been about 30 seconds in just one breath. It turns out that my grandmother was sleepwalking, trying to enter my room, and slammed herself into the baby gate that we had for my dog. I honestly don't know what was more terrifying, hearing that shriek suddenly in the dead of night, or flicking on the dim ceiling lights and seeing her stare at me, face decrepit, mouth agape, and her eyes wide as can be. It makes my blood run cold every time I think about it. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they only had dated for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most places that were listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house, and within 30 minutes, she received an email back with all the details and a time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrived, there was a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken. Use back door." Walking around the house, it looked nice, but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opened it. At first, Amanda thinks that she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out and he was the landlord, and the occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off, but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven. Only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping the lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walked down the hallway into the living room, she noticed the front door had a plank nailed across it. Amanda's creepometer is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to be polite. As she's giving the guy her "thanks for showing me the place" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and that she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door of the house. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks outside in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers the phone. "Hey, are you here?" "Yeah, I'll come out from around the back and let you in." "Oh, it's great. You have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out the back door. She says that the guy just looked at her like he was very confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother everything. The cops were called, and they took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door. To prove that there was nothing there, I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us, and then slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while we went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later, trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I haven't slept in the living room since. Me and my two buddies were on a night dive, hunting prawns. It was about 1 a.m., and we're a good 100 feet deep in the darkest black you could imagine. We used to do this thing on night dives where we would get in a circle, turn off our lights, and then stir up the water and watch the bioluminescence float around us like floating stars in a black, watery space. It was beautiful. Only this one time, we turn off our lights, stir up the water, and the water glows just enough to reveal a fourth person sitting in our circle. We were at a dive resort, so it wasn't so odd to see another diver. Only it was 1 a.m., and we had seen no one else prepping a dive at the dock. He was also alone, which was odd considering the dangerous conditions of a night dive in those waters. He had no fins or gloves. I don't know how he swam so well without fins, or didn't get hypothermia without boots or gloves. We wore dry suits because it was so cold, but this dude was in a wetsuit with exposed skin. We thought we saw a giant gash in one of his legs, so the three of us all notice him and we're too scared to move. I can hear my buddies panting in their regs, and the guy just smiles, waves, and then swims away. Whenever you think you're alone and someone just shows up, like in an alley at night, it's weird. 100 feet underwater at night is terrifying. When I was like 13 years old, my mother dragged my younger sister and I on a Disney cruise. I won't lie, at first I was extremely pissed about going, but it actually was cool. Something crazy happened to me while on the trip though. One night my mom and sister were annoying the hell out of me, and I told my mom that I was going to the top deck to just look around. She told me to be careful and to come back in 20 minutes. I told her that I would, and when I got up to the top deck, I walked over to the railing and was looking down at the black ocean that was being cut through by our huge ship. As I was looking down, I saw what looked like a man that appeared to have fallen or something. He went by very fast and disappeared, but I thought I saw his arm come up at one point, and at the time, I even thought I heard him make a noise. I saw his face for a split second and he looked petrified, as I imagine you would be if you fell off of a cruise ship, and I started freaking out. I ran over to a woman and man that were talking and playing cards at a table nearby. They were wearing the ship's employee clothing, and I told them what I just saw. They both took it very seriously, and the man called for help on his radio. I explained to more employees, including the captain, what I saw, and they did an emergency passenger welfare check. My mom got called up to where I was, and a while later, they told me everyone on the ship was accounted for. They pretty much made me swear on my life that I was sure and that I wasn't lying. At the time I told them I was sure, and 11 years later now, I am just as sure I saw a man in that water. Working on a school report late at night in my ground-level bedroom, I glance up to look at my reflection in the glass of the window, and then I realize it's not my reflection. Someone else is staring at me through my window, and then they disappear. I shudder. It still gives me chills when I think about it. One night, my buddies and I were going for a midnight walk around the roads by the house that we were staying at. Since we were under 18, We could have gotten in trouble for being out past curfew, so we would hide behind trees or whatever we could when a car came by. One of my friends said, "Why are you guys hiding? No one is going to care or do anything." Well, the next vehicle passes, and everyone hides behind something but him, to prove a point. Shortly after that, the same vehicle, a red pickup truck, turns around up the road and heads back in our direction. This time, we all hid. We figured that they made a wrong turn or something. But no. Every few minutes the truck would pass by us as we hid, trying to find us. At one point, some guys got out of the truck with flashlights and were searching around the woods and the shrubs for us, but we were about 100 yards away from them. Eventually, we got back to the house, but they still drove up and down the road looking a few more times. Whether they were trying to scare some random kid they saw, or something worse, I'm not sure. One night, I was laying in bed, trying to get my daughter to go to sleep, but she was refusing to. As I was getting more annoyed and tired, I asked, "Why won't you go to sleep?" Her response was, "Because those two people are watching us," and pointed to the corner of the room where it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. Without making a noise, I removed her from her bed and slowly brought her into my room and locked the door. She never said anything like that again. When I was growing up, one of my best friends told me about a very creepy situation involving him, his younger brother, and a man in the window. When my friend and his little brother were younger, they shared a bedroom. They are some years apart, but his younger brother was born with a multitude of different health issues, including multiple sclerosis, and he's confined to a wheelchair and cannot care for himself. To keep an eye on him overnight when his parents couldn't, they shared a bedroom. One night, my friend randomly woke up for no particular reason and happened to glance over at his younger brother, but noticed something very startling. A strange silhouette of a man wearing a top hat was looking in through the window behind his younger brother's bed. The first thing my friend did was jump up and turn the light on, and then ran into his parents' room to tell them what he saw. When his parents came back into their room to investigate, his younger brother was having a seizure in his bed. A few of his family members say it was his younger brother's guardian angel standing in the window that night. My friend believes it was death. It's all pretty unsettling to me. A few years ago, I went to a Christmas party. That night, my housemates went home earlier, while I decided to stay and get in the Christmas spirit with a few other friends. I ended up getting pretty hammered and got home around 3 a.m. Instead of going straight to bed, I got another beer inside and then went out the back porch to have a smoke and look at the stars. I was outside a couple of minutes when I see the light go on in the kitchen. My housemate looks out the window and sees me out back. I wave and generally look like a drunk idiot. He just gets a glass of water and goes to bed. I finish my smoke and my beer, and I do the same thing. The next morning we're rehashing the previous night when he mentions getting up and seeing me having a smoke in the backyard. "Who came back from the party with you last night?" I give him a weird look and reply, "No one. I was out there alone." He insists, "Nah, man, there was someone out there with you, behind you on the porch, when you were looking inside waving." To this day, he stands by that this is what really happened. Whoever it was standing right behind me the whole time. I saw no one and heard nothing. It gives me the chills every time I think about it. Cody, Wyoming, midnight. I had just finished a very long day at work. I am a medical courier, and I am regularly on the road, staying in hotels, and life is never dull. This particular evening, I wound up on a 500-mile drive that ended in Cody, Wyoming, at around midnight. It had been cold. It was December after all, and this is Wyoming. The roads had been very so-so that night. They weren't clear, but they weren't treacherous. It was one of those drives in the dark where you are on edge the whole time, staying alert for 500 miles in the dark on roads that were nearly abandoned. At this time of night, with light snow and heavy winds, it takes a lot out of a person. This particular week, it had been very busy. I had been in 4 states that week by the time I reached Wyoming that evening. The drive to the patient's house was up on a windy, slick road, and the drive was uneventful. After I had dropped the medicine off to them, I called the boss to let them know I had made it and was heading to a hotel to get some sleep. Pretty usual conversation. We talked briefly about how much they would reimburse me for the hotel room. They always say $80 to $100. It's pretty typical and fair, since the cheap hotel in Cody, Wyoming is about that price. I, however, am 31, and a good night's rest, a good free breakfast, and a nice AM soak in a hot tub are requirements for when I catch myself in a hotel room. I know that by the time I get to the hotel, I have put on serious miles, so I treat myself. 1, because if I am staying in a hotel, it has been a profitable day, and I can afford to treat myself just a little. And 2, I feel better after a good night's rest, a great breakfast, and a nice soak. I will not name the chain of hotels I stay at, but I frequent one chain because it's the best value hotel in my hometown, which is back in Nebraska. Tonight, I pulled into the hotel, which I have stayed at 3 or 4 times now, so I am familiar with the place. I had called ahead about 8 hours before when I was leaving Denver to call and book a room and let them know they would be expecting me at midnight. I walk into the hotel with my bag, dusting off the snow that had fallen on me while I got my stuff out of the car and walked inside. It's very quiet. There's no music, and the TV isn't on in the lobby. I wander to the counter, leaving a trail of wet shoe prints behind from coming in out of the snow into the lobby, my shoes squeaking as I approach the counter. When I get to the counter, there is no one there. On the counter is a bowl of ice cream with a brownie from the restaurant connected to the hotel. The local paper is open to the comics page, and the Sudoku is half filled out with a pen sitting there. Hanging on the back of the chair is a small lady's coat with fake fur fringe around the hood. On the floor next to the chair are a pair of smaller pink and black Nikes and a black purse. I figure that she, by the assumption of the coat, shoes, and purse, is in the bathroom, so I stand at the counter quietly, waiting on her to return. I fiddle with my wallet, getting out my card to pay for it, and my ID. I scroll through on my phone and hook up to their free Wi-Fi. 5 minutes go by, and then 10. At 15 minutes the phone starts ringing. I still had no idea where she was, and I had begun to get irritated. It had been a long day, and I wanted to get rested before I got up and drove home in the morning. After the phone stopped ringing, and I started to get frustrated, I began to wander around the lobby and behind the counter shouting, "Hello, is anyone here?" as loudly as possible. The area behind the counter is an employee-only area. I venture back behind the counter, where a hallway leads to the back-of-house area connected to the offices, staff elevator, bathrooms, laundry, and the restaurant. I venture down the hallway shouting, "Hello." Still no one answers. It is now 12:30 a.m. As I return to the counter and begin looking for a posted phone number for a manager or someone of authority, the phone rings. The cordless phone still laying next to the paper she had opened. Frustrated and exhausted, I answer the phone, hoping it's someone who could tell me where the woman is who is supposed to check me in. It's not. It's another guest who had tried calling earlier for a wake-up call in the morning. I explained to the gentleman on the phone my situation and how I cannot help him. He states he is coming to the lobby to help me look for the girl at the counter. I had not found a number to call. 5 minutes go by and the strange older man with odd glasses and long, unkempt hair comes into the lobby from the first floor hallway. At this point, I had been behind the counter and had been shouting to the point I feared I may wake up other guests. I had wandered through the back area, the lobby, and the front part of the restaurant, all while shouting, and no one responded. This guy had given me the creeps, and I was exhausted but on high alert. There was an employee missing, and a creepy guy who just happened to appear in the same time she is missing. Feeling nervous about this gentleman, I stay prepared for any strange behavior and keep myself at least arm's distance from him the entire time. I explain where I have looked, that I have yelled. At this point, I begin to go through what I call worst case scenario preparation. This guy could have easily overpowered a small woman. I may be standing here with a crazy person. I keep my space and my back towards the main entry just in case. I am a grown man, just under 6 feet. I have had self-defense courses, and I have a concealed carry weapon after encountering a bear at a patient's house in the fall. I have no reason to believe I am in immediate trouble, but this guy gives me the creeps. It is at this point I debate calling the cops. It's now 12:45 a.m. The gentleman tells me maybe she's in the bathroom, which I respond to that I had thought that myself, but I had walked by and yelled loudly when I walked through the back and no one responded. He insists that we check the bathrooms. My red flag goes off and I put another foot or two of space between us as I let him lead us down the hallway to the employee bathroom. My heart and mind are racing at this point. Did this guy kill her? And now he's going to try to kill me? I start to worry about my safety as we go down a hallway that leads to small rooms and with one exit in and out. We reach the bathroom. He knocks and announces himself and then opens the door. The bathroom is empty. We check a few more rooms and the elevator, but we find nothing. We venture back to the lobby where I stand behind the counter looking for any phone number that could be a manager or supervisor. After about 10 minutes, I find a number and someone answers. It's now 12:55 a.m. The half-asleep voice on the other end of the phone is the maintenance woman for the hotel. Confused as to who I am and why I'm calling, I explain the situation as the creepy man stands on the other side of the counter, staring at me in a dead cold manner. The maintenance woman says she will be there in 10 minutes or so. I hang up the phone. I walk around the counter still confused, looking at her stuff there, as if she just vanished. It's at this point I decide to wander towards the lobby and the seating area for the restaurant. Once in the doorway, I turn the corner, and down at the end of the booths, there are a pair of legs hanging out of the booth. I had walked within 15 feet of there while checking around before the creepy guy showed up. I see her legs hanging, and instantly the pit of my stomach turns sour, and a sense of dread comes over me. Suddenly the creepy guy walks right up by me. Thinking the worst, I take a few quick steps away from him and down the row of booths in the dark restaurant. With him at the other end, I look in the booth where she is laying. She is maybe 20 years old and very pretty. I shake her foot. She doesn't respond. I shake again, saying, "Hey!" Nothing. It's at this moment the creepy guy starts to walk down to the booth that I finally feel I may need to defend myself. I kneel down to draw my ankle holster as he quickly comes down the row of booths, and it's at this exact moment the girl wakes up and accidentally kicks me in the chest, knocking me gently on my ass and stopping Mr. Creepy in his tracks. also stopping me from drawing a weapon. She had been asleep. Mr. Creepy was just a guest. Moments later, the maintenance woman arrived, and by 1:15 a.m., I was in my room, trying to decompress.